Hello, welcome to another video review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for filminquiry.com, movieswithmark.com, twincitiesgeek.com, and a whole bunch of other places. So it's been a while since we've done one of these streams, and we've got a lot of movies to catch up on. So what have we got on tap today? We've got to talk about the new Predator movie, Prey, which came out earlier this month, and everyone's been talking about it, so we got to talk about it as well. We're also going to be talking about the new dark horror comedy, or kind of more like a slasher comedy, but Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. We'll also be talking about the newest film out this weekend, 3,000 Years of Longing, a new fantasy romance by George Miller. We'll also be talking about a lot of action films like Bullet Train and Day Shift, and if we have time, there's one other film I'd like to talk about as well. So we'll get right into that. So let's bring up, let's talk about the most recent one. Why not? All right, let me get my notes up here for it. Where did you go? There you are. All right. Make sure I got up all the notes here so that I can see everything. All right. Whoa. And 3, 2, 1. Here comes the review. Sorry, a little problem with the tongue there. All right, let's try it one more time. So 3,000 Years of Longing is the new film by George Miller, a fantasy romance that kind of takes the story of genies and three wishes and tells this like surprisingly adult tale. Now, of course, like for anyone who might have seen like trailers of this film, you might be assuming that this is kind of like a little bit more on the erotic side. And it kind of is. Like, it's definitely a mature fantasy romance that's going on here. But it has a little bit more to it that I didn't quite expect for a film like this. Like, it's very daring, it's surprising, and it goes into some areas that I did not expect it to explore. And it has this very freewheeling nature where it feels like this is like a fantasy story that's perfectly attuned for adults. Like, it always feels like, like fantasy tends to be like focused on like the much like younger crowd with like young adults and stuff like that. And here's one for people who feel very much like they're in like that golden age and they want something a little bit more adult and touches into like more of their own desires that come with kind of like growing older and becoming a little bit more weary. So the story is that Tilda Swinton plays Binny, who is a literary scholar. She spends all her time obsessing over stories. She loves them. She loves the power of them. And she's especially fascinated by myths. She likes the idea of how, like, as we learn more, like, myths are kind of like, like kind of like guidance towards the unknown, the closer like you get to understanding more about life. But it's kind of like locked herself into like this rigid view. Now, like my fears kind of like set in once like you see Tilda Swinton as like kind of like this bookworm, and you immediately assume, oh, okay, so she's going to encounter a genie and the genie's just kind of gonna like give her a makeover or whatever. And thankfully that is not the case. She discovers the genie, the djinn rather, while she's in Turkey. She finds this magical lamp, brushes it with an electric toothbrush of all things to clean it, and then out comes the genie, played by the djinn, played by Idris Elba. And surprisingly, the djinn is actually a very fascinating character. Like as the djinn reveals, like he's not just like like just this being who wants his freedom or is completely like subservient to whatever his master wills of him. Like, we actually get to learn a lot about him, and it's mostly just because of the curiosity that comes with Tilda Swinton's character. Because like, here's where this type of story is perfectly mature. It's like, here's Tilda Swinton's character who has spent all her time obsessing over stories. So she's very much familiar with the djinn and the whole idea of three wishes and like the cautionary tale elements that usually come with this type of story. So it's very smart on that angle, because like she's immediately like, oh, okay, yeah, you're you're a Jin. I've read these stories. I kind of know what the deal is here. And the Jin is kind of like, okay, yeah, you get the gist of it. But there's a little bit more of a personal side. Because for roughly a little over half the film is just exploring the backstory of the Jin, with a little bit of like peppering of Binny as well. But for the most part, we're learning about the Jin's history, how he was tempted by love, how the wishes never quite finished, how like people who got everything they wanted ultimately had no use for him and kind of cast him aside. As well as showing like all these little moments of like hope for him that are kind of like dashed, and sometimes these come directly from masters, like when like the last master that he had before Binny is revealed to be this woman who's learned like the secrets of the universe and is frustrated that she can't express them all, and kind of like grows tired of like the Jin trying to comfort her amid all this. And then sometimes it's more like indirect, like there's times where like the Jin is just trapped in this bottle for centuries and decades and just wants someone to pick him up, and almost does, and never quite has that happen to him. And it forms the great basis for this romance between the Jin and Binny, where we learn more about Binny, that she's been divorced. She's experienced loss. She prefers to get lost in stories, and she doesn't want to be hurt again. So obviously she's very cautious about trying to trust this Jin with with granting her wishes. And also because like she's very skeptical of like the wishes that she would want, because the whole deal is like the Jin will only grant you wishes that come directly from your heart, about what you desire most out of your life. And it's an aspect that Binny hasn't quite thought about, and it coincides with the Jin. Basically, they're both weary souls who connect on a greater level of like trying to find more meaning in their lives. And I especially like how even for like how like you're going to hear this complaint from a lot of people. Like this film is very uneven to how it's kind of like set up, like because we get a lot of backstory for most of the film, and we spend very little time outside of that with the relationship between Binny and Jin finally having combined, which, yes, in case you're curious, yes, there's a pretty erotic scene between Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba. The trailers have not lied to you on that level. But I kind of like what they explore. Like Binny tries to find a greater understanding of the world, and the Jin as well. Like I like this aspect where the Jin is very much like a fish out of water, where like he's been locked for like a very long time in this bottle, and tries to understand how far humanity has come since then. And it's not like a standard fish out of water type deal. Like you think it might be at one point, just because one of the first things he interacts with is a television, and you're like, oh, magic box or whatever. It's like, okay, is this the type of film? But no, actually, like he learns pretty quick. It's like, oh, I'm seeing like electromagnetic waves here, which is something that I'm very familiar with. And throughout the rest of the film, he finds himself more fascinated with humanity, and how like creation shifts when he's not present, and and how fascinating it is when he is present in it. Like he gets to witness brain surgeries, and like he obsesses with like a satellite dish at one point, and all these surprising little moments that I didn't expect to see in this film, that has lots of special effects and historical drama and war epics and so much going on, and yet it always has this prime focus of these two souls and how they like form this romance. I guess like the biggest comparison I can think to it this year is there was a film that came out earlier this year called Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, which is about an older woman and a younger man who basically an older woman and a younger prostitute who connect and spend most of the time in their hotel room, just coming to terms with like themselves and their sexuality. And it's very much in that vein. It explores like it's not exactly like Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, where it's just like a little bit of like of an erotic drama with like some more magic thrown into it. It feels like it's very much, it has like this greater focus on like a little bit more of like omnipresence, as well as like heart's desire and stuff like that. It's a very surprisingly nuanced romance that wraps it all in this fun little fantasy cocoon that explores all these areas that I didn't expect it to go into. Like it touches on a lot of desires and like issues of like coming to terms with yourself and feeling betrayed and having your heart broken so many times. And I know, like, just because the way it's diced up with all like the backstories and all that, we get a lot of narration from Idris Elba, and if you're expecting a lot of gin sex in here, you're probably not going to get as much as you think. But on this level of having this mature romance that blossoms between these two souls, especially because Idris Elba and Tilda Swinton are just like exceptionally perfect in these roles, especially for roles where they're expected to like switch up with like languages and react to like different special effects marvels. Like when Idris Elba first shows up, he's like as large as the room, so Tilda Swinton's kind of got to try to like maintain composure, but also speak Greek and try to like explain the rest of the world at the same time, which is a pretty impressive feat here. It's a very, very surprising film I mean, like, I guess I should kind of expect, like, George Miller to be a little bit versatile. I mean, the guy who can go from making a Mad Max film to making Babe, and among other films, and to turn out something just as fascinating as this, where even with, like, with myself comparing it to Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, I don't even think that's, like, a great comparison, too, because there's so many other aspects that are covered of this film that it's just it's just a mesmerizing film, and there are so many wonderful little like small moments that I love getting lost within here. Like there are moments where he's telling this like the story of how he lost his love to someone who could play music beautifully with like as kind of like a one-man band in this kind of like versatile setup, which is pretty clever but also very like very it was great to get just like lost within that music. And there's also little special effect sequences here, like when the djinn kind of like shows off a little bit of his ability to manipulate electromagnetic waves. There are moments where like when one of his masters asks for the secrets of the universe and we kind of get to see her understand everything on like a molecular level. Just all these wonderful little moments that I think just culminate beautifully and combine to just make this fantastic fantasy romance that I can't find like the best comparison for it. And I think that's kind of what I love about the film. Like it really is not an easy comparison to anything, and it was so refreshing to see a film like this, you know. So wonderful. All right. So 3,000 Years of Longing is currently playing in theaters everywhere. I have no idea where it will... Well, it's through MGM, so I imagine it will probably stream on, like, Amazon Prime, depending on who gobbles up the rights first. So it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know for sure where it's going to drop on streaming, so check it out in theaters while you can. Okay. Let's try Prey. Ooh, yeah, we got to get to Prey. Yes. Okay. Let me grab... There we go. And just grab my notes here. Okay. So, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. So, Prey is the new Predator film, but a refreshing change of pace for a Predator film. Mainly because this film is set in a much different setting with very different characters and a much different Predator. So there's a lot of switching up that's going on in this film, and it's probably one of the better Predator sequels, if you want to call it that. I don't know if you would call it like a sequel. Like, I guess it technically be a prequel because it takes place long before the events of the first Predator film. But however you want to dice it, this is a very solid film that I think gets to the core of what made the original Predator film work best, while at the same time changing stuff up and trying to find something new to explore with it. So it takes place in 1700s Great Plains, where you have a Comanche tribe that tries to live out in the woods, and among the tribe is Naru, played by Amber Midthunder. And Naru wants to kind of like prove herself as a warrior for her village. She's very skilled in medicine. Like, she fulfills kind of like the role that's been expected of her. Like, she's expert on how to treat wounds and how to like chill the body and, treat like fevers and stuff like that. But in her spare time, she also studies like, how to throw an axe, how to shoot a bow and arrow. And she's pretty skilled at it. She spends a lot of time working on this. But of course, her tribe only wants her to fulfill one role. So she wants, like, even like her brother Tabe, who kind of roots for her. He's like, okay, yeah, you're a great warrior too, but everyone else like doesn't feel like women should be warriors, so I'm just gonna go with the flow of it. She feels like she needs a moment to prove herself. Like, there's a rite of passage that she wants to undertake that will make her a successful hunter, and it feels like she almost gets it at one point, but then it's kind of like taken away from her by essentially not recognizing teamwork. So she needs something bigger that's going to help prove herself. And that something bigger happens to be when the Predator comes to town. This alien from another world who just comes to the woods to hunt big game. It starts off slow with snakes and then works its way up to bears. Now, the Predator, I love, like, the reveal of the alien Predator here. And it's mostly because, like, they make the smart call of always keeping the Predator concealed, like, building it up as, like, a mystery. You mostly see it in, like, the invisible camouflage, and then it slowly kind of comes more into view. That by the time you actually get to see the full-body Predator, it was a great redesign, I thought. Like, if you compare it to like 2018's The Predator, where it was just like this big bulky mask with like the giant red eyes and everything, there's something like very fitting about the way this Predator designed. Like, the helmet this time feels more like kind of like, it looks like very much like a kind of like a bone mask. Like, it's got like the laser tech that kind of like shoot all the arrows and stuff like that. But it has this very like naturalistic look where it feels like he could blend in a little bit with the Great Plains environment. That being said, once the helmet comes off, I really liked seeing how, like, they've definitely made the elongated jaw a lot bigger this time. Where it almost feels like, I almost feel cheated, where, like, there's never a moment where you get to see the Predator's giant mouth kind of open and just, like, devour an animal or something like that. I feel like that would have been, like, a missed opportunity there. That being said, the Predator does establish itself quite well as a threat. It's mostly seen in the woods and darkness and shadow and invisibility, and it slowly starts coming out to kill other members of like the Comanche tribe and later fur traders who they encounter as well. So, I mean, yeah, like the Predator itself is great, but I also want to like stress like how much I really dug the character of Naru. Like, Naru is not established as this very like egotistical character. Like, she's very much, she wants to be a part of her tribe, she wants to contribute, and she wants to be a team player. And even when she's kind of not seen as one, she's still trying to be a team player. Like, she sneaks away with the hunting tribe to kind of like work with them, and even when they don't and want to scoff at her, she still wants to do what's best and save as many people as she can. Now, of course, because this is the Predator story, she's not going to be able to save everyone, but she does her best, and she also recognizes that she gets as far as she does because she gets help from others. A help that she initially gave and wasn't respected, and here she's kind of using that respect, her own respect, I guess, to take the teamwork that's available and eventually defeat this Predator and ultimately protect her tribe, which is like the bigger thing. Like, it never feels like it's an egotistical thing where it's just Naru just wants to be a badass warrior. I mean, she is, but it's not like that's her main drive. Her main drive is she wants to be a protector, she wants to help people, which is a pretty noble goal. So you really are rooting for her to survive this very versatile Predator that has a lot of weapons at its disposal. You get to see a lot of cool kills, especially once they encounter the fur traders. Like it's one of those things where it's like they encounter the French fur traders, and like they're the enemies for a while until the predator shows up, and then it's kind of like, like the French fur traders are basically like the highest body count for the predator in this film. So you get a lot of cool kills with them. You get a lot of decapitations and amputations, cool scenes of like the arrows going through people's eyes and stuff like that, and chopping people up. There's a lot of great dark humorous moments, like where like where the predator has like this perfect shield that can ricochet bullets, and one bullet perfectly ricochets into like one of the other French hunters, which is so satisfying to see moments like that, where it's like, ooh, there's a lot of like bone crunching gory moments that are surprisingly fun, because you kind of want that out of a predator film, because like it's weird, like this is a film that like it's very much the same story as the first Predator, where it's just like, alien comes to Earth, a whole bunch of people got to stop this predator, and only kind of one person ends up living here. A little bit more closer to horror here, because you have a little bit of like the final girl trope. But yeah, it's essentially the same story, right down to the cleverness of trying to conceal your body heat once Naru figures that out, and then uses a lot more of her smarts in that area, with like a little bit of like the foreshadowing. And I guess that's kind of like the almost like a little bit of like a weakness of the film, is that it's relying on the same Predator format, which I think is almost a little bit too safe, just because it's basically the same flow, I would say, of like the first Predator film. It's definitely not the same setting or the same tone, because there's definitely more of a darker, humorous edge when you get to a lot more of like the violent climax. There's a bigger sense of like sacrifice, I think, too, with a few of the characters, and I feel like it has a much different tone by the end of the film, as opposed to like to the first Predator film. So it's weird. Like, this is a film that's both like, it's safe but also experimental at the same time, because like a lot of people have noted, like, you have the main characters who like are Native Americans. You have the Comanche dub of the film, which I have not watched it. I've been told it's great, and I want to check it out eventually. Especially since like like a few characters will just casually speak Comanche a few times in the film. But just like the way it's set up, like I love the way it's shot too. Like, you have like great moments of like focusing on the close-ups when you need them, for like the axe hitting the tree, and there's never a moment where like you don't know where these characters are within like the wilderness. You always know where they are and where the predator is at every moment here, which is great for a film where like you're shooting on like these like vast landscapes of like mountains and woods and swampy, muddy ranges and stuff like that it can be easy to just be lost and just forget where characters are. And it never feels like there's a moment like that. It always feels like it's very much focused. There's never just like a smeary blur of action. Although, as some people have pointed out, yeah, there are some like moments where the special effects could be a lot better. The sequence where the predator fights a bear definitely could have been handled a lot better, just because we see a lot of close-ups of it, and it kind of reveals how obvious the bear is CGI in that scene. That being said, I did like a lot of the practical effects with the predator here. I did see a few of the behind-the-scenes moments with the full-bodied predator suit, which is really cool. So it's great to finally have like a Predator film where it's like you're not lowering your expectations. It's felt like for the last like 20 to 30 years or so that you've always been having to like have a very like tepid interpretation of like the Predator films. It's kind of like, okay, it's another Predator film, just gotta lower the bar, lower it, because like it's probably not going to get better. I felt that way about 2018's The Predator. It is not a good film, and it's just trying to be like a straight up goofy film, and I almost kind of dug it on that. It looks like, okay, look, you're never going to match the first Predator film, so just whatever, go goofy. It's like Shane Black wants to do some crazy stuff with it, whatever. But here, actually feels like it's refreshing. Like, it feels like it's going back to the roots of what made Predator great, but also kind of tinkering with the formula and trying to see what else works. I will say, I did like how this film has gotten people's like creative cells flowing and thinking about, oh, what other time periods could you insert the Predator into? I mean, it's pretty boundless. I mean, I feel like with this format, it could get like tedious after a while if it's the same story over and over. I would honestly like to see a film where the Predator wins. We're just like, just thrown back further in time where like the humans try their best but ultimately end up losing to it, just to switch it up a bit. Because this, like I said, this is more or less the same story as like the first Predator film, which isn't a terrible thing. It's a fairly safe thing. But I think if you want to keep going with this, I think you need a little bit more than just like scenery change here. Like for what this film set out to be, within this setting and having centering around like a Comanche tribe, it works really well in its own right. There's never a moment where you're just kind of like, oh, okay, it's going through the motions of Predator. Even for moments where like they're literally just making Predator references, just small little wink ones, like like if it bleeds, we can kill it. Little lines like that, which I think are fine. I think they're fine if everything else is working and you're not just thinking about the original film. That's great. If they want to do that, you can have your winking too. I'm just saying, if you're going to do more Predator films, which they might, switch up the story a little bit, because I don't just want the future Predator to just be historical like costume changes for the series. I feel like that there's a little bit more you could do with it, but this film as it is, I really love Prey. I really, really love that film. All right, so Prey is currently playing on Hulu. I really hope it gets a Blu-ray release, which I don't know. I'm fairly certain it might, because I think it's through like 20th Century Studios. So we very well could get a Prey Blu-ray, which I think there might be. Let's actually do a quick check on that, because I have not looked up if there is a Prey Blu-ray. There is, I think. No, wait, that's from Blu-ray.com. That's just a review. Is there a Blu-ray? I'm not seeing one, unless there's one on the press release page. But yeah, it's currently playing on Hulu right now. It released a few weeks ago, earlier in August. If you have not seen it, please do so. It's playing on Hulu, or if you're in Europe, on Disney Plus. And I love that film. What an amazing film. All right. Let's talk about something a little bit sillier here. A bit of bodies. Okay. Get all the notes up here. All right. So, Bodies is a slasher comedy, I guess is the best way you could describe it. Here's the thing. This is a film that is very much mocking of youth culture, where it's going to be like a little bit of a dark satire. I don't quite want to say like this is like, like a boomer humor's interpretation of how young people would react if they were to handle like murder. It almost kind of feels like that. In another way, as I was watching the film, I kind of got this sense that it was almost kind of like a more modern murder mystery that's plagued by, like more relatable anxieties. So I'm kind of two minds of this film. So the premise is that a group of young people in their 20s have all gathered together to have a party at their friend's house. Their friend's rich house. Like, they're all very much like rich, upper middle class. I think they're mostly upper class because they like to... One of the slurs they have is calling somebody upper middle class, I guess. But the whole reason they're having this party is because there's a hurricane going on, and they decide they're going to all ride out the hurricane by just partying at this house. So it starts off simple enough. You have we follow two central characters before we get there. We follow I'm trying to remember it. Yeah, Amanda Stenberg, who plays Sophie, and she's bringing her new girlfriend B, played by Maria Baklava. And they're very much in love. They establish that right from the very first scene, but they're also very addicted to, like, their social media presence and technology. This is made very much clear from, like, the very first opening scene, where we see them making out very passionately, and then immediately cut to them just on their phones. So that pretty much, like, sets the tone here. Like, these are characters who are passionate, but also bound by, the current world that we're in. So they end up coming to this party, and already there's some tension here. There's a murder mystery angle already set up, because the people there weren't quite expecting Sophie. Some of them are arguing that she wasn't in the group chat, and that she wasn't invited, and that B is a little bit more of like a wild card that they're not quite sure they want to invite, especially since they established that Sophie's very much like a party animal, like the rest of her friends. Like, because the rest of her friends are, they have a Jordan, played by Mihaly Harold. You have Emma, played by Chase V. Wonders. Rachel Sennett playing Alice. Lee Pace is a bit of a wild card here, I would say, because Lee Pace plays Greg, this character who is basically like the cool guy who can, like, open beer bottles with, like, a sword and all that. He impresses everyone, and he immediately makes Pete Davidson's character David immediately jealous, because, like, so we immediately establish, like, quite a few characters here. We establish characters who feel insecure, characters who want to protect their reputation, and characters who just can't quite figure out. So they end up having a party. They drink a lot. They do they do coke. They play some silly games. They get a little bit accusatory, and some mild fights kind of, like, break out over jealousy and accusations. Like, at one point they play, like, their murder mystery game, of course, the titular game, Bodies, 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 and they end up fighting a little bit. We have we're eased into, like, the murder mystery, right? We get to know a little bit about these characters, so that when one of them turns up dead, we're immediately suspicious. We try to figure out, okay, someone killed this person, but who did it? And for the rest of the film, the rest of the house and everyone else is trying to figure out who the real killer is, while also revealing a lot of their insecurities. So this is where, like, I was starting to get like, okay, this is kind of more like, like a more modern murder mystery, because a lot of the stuff, the anxieties that come out here they're, to put it mildly, they're laughable. They're people who are insecure about their podcasts, who want to hide their pasts, people who want to, like, understand other people but can't quite do it, performative allyship and stuff like that. And basically, like, people who are ashamed of themselves and don't want to reveal these aspects, even though it's like in, like, murder mysteries, how, like, they have, like, dark secrets are revealed, like, I have, like my mother had this dark past and they were alcoholics and stuff like that. Here they're very small things. They're like, it's the smallest things that you might understand that, like, younger people would have anxiety about, like, someone not liking your podcast, or, like, someone discriminating against you just because your parents went to therapy, or, like, your parents didn't make enough money, small things like that it's just like the whole film is just a series of misunderstandings. So and on that level, I think it mostly works. It's like a series of just, like, misunderstandings that lead to, like, more murders that keep going throughout the film, that by the time you eventually figure out who, like, when the film actually reveals, like, how these murders happened, it's kind of like perfect for this type of film. It's like there isn't, like, an easy resolve. There's no, like, someone's master plan to do it all, like, because clearly these characters are too dumb to be masterminds of murder here, that they just kind of, like, stumble into it. I guess, like, on that level, the best comparison to it might be for people who have seen the film, there's Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which is all about misunderstandings within like a slasher genre. Here it's very much the same thing. It's a bunch of characters thrown together, murder happens, they get insecure, there's misunderstandings, and there's a lot of killing and stuff like that. I like the way that this film is directed. Like they do get you very much into like that party mindset by having a little bit of like the quick cutting, the loud music here provided by what's it called, like Disaster Piece. Like there are actually quite a few songs in this that actually got stuck in my head, like and not just because it played in the credits, but like Bored in the House really kind of got into my ear a little bit while I was watching this film. But just like the staging is great, where like, you know, they're trapped in the hurricane, so they can't just leave, they can't just contact the authorities, and the acting here is really on point. I think all the actors did a really good job here, especially for, I mean, like it seems like Pete Davidson just plays the same character in all his films, and here, yeah, it's just like a young recluse, which is fine, who's like a little bit insecure. Lee Pace was quite a bit of fun as this person who everyone mistakes for like being an army veteran, but they later learned that the person who invited him like misinterpreted vet as veterinarian. So all these like wonderful, I guess your enjoyment of this film ultimately depends on like how much you like watching these characters stumble and just get ridiculously violent over the smallest stuff. So on that level, I love how like the satire is very much on point here. It knows what it's mocking and what it wants to mock about these characters, where you're not quite feeling like you don't feel as bad when some of these characters die. Like it's one of those films where you're not quite rooting for the killer because there isn't really a central killer. If I'm giving any spoilers here, I apologize. But it's almost like you're just watching just the victims without the killer. And on some level that might be aggravating, but on another level it's just fun to watch these people stumble. For as cruel as that might sound, it's very telling to watch like these people just go to pieces over stuff that really shouldn't be that damning, and yet for them it is. I will say though, like one aspect that did kind of aggravate me is that this film stars Connor O'Malley, who you might know from like Joe Pera Talks to You, and he does like a whole bunch of like ridiculous skits on YouTube. But Connor O'Malley's in this film, and he's probably the quietest character in this film, mostly because we don't see Connor O'Malley like much at all in this film, and the few times we do see him, he's like the most, it was surreal. It's like it's the most docile version of him I've ever seen, because like usually he's done videos like, you know, like the first talk show underwater, like the first talk show on a bike, where he's screaming at the camera the whole time, and he's always extreme and aggressive. And here he's just kind of like, kind of like an average dad. Which I guess like a little bit, I don't know. There's a little bit of like a juxtaposed angle I kind of like on that. Like, and I went back and forth on this film for a while because on one level, I like the dark humor. It's got some great jabs in here. I like the stuff that it's mocking. At the same time, you also kind of question like how much investment do you want to have in these characters when they keep making so many mistakes. Like, because like on one level, yeah, because the throwing fits over like nothing, you kind of want to see them kind of destruct. But at the same time, it's also, well, who am I really rooting for here at times? Like, I mean, it's weird. Like it's very much a satire, and I think you really got to know that going into that, just in case you really like Maria Baklava and you want to get attached to like B as a character. You might not as the film goes on and you see what she does, but then again, that's most of the characters in this film. So I guess it all depends on how much you like watching slasher victims die over like the most ridiculous stuff. And on that level, I think mostly this type of film works for what it's aiming to be. So there you go. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is currently playing in theaters. It's an A24 film, so I imagine it will be on Amazon Prime probably come Christmas, I believe. Well, actually, you know, Christmas might be the latest. It might be later, but I don't know. It's an A24 film, and I think A24 films have kind of been shifting a little bit ever since like Everything Everywhere All at Once came out. They're like whoa, pump the brakes on throwing it onto Amazon Prime. Let's throw it back into theaters here. Obviously, Bodies is not as big, so it'll probably go to Prime sooner. You don't think there'll be a Blu? I hope there's a Blu-ray. I think I don't know. I kind of have a little bit more hope for it just because it's 20th Century Studios, so there's a little bit of hope there might be a Blu-ray. I think with enough support, there might be people who might like it. I love this film plays with age as Lee Pace is basically Gen X trying to understand Gen Z, and I love that too. How like Lee Pace, his character, there's never a moment where he's like where he fully understands what these characters are doing, nor does he try to. It just kind of feels like he's there trying to like gel into their world without trying too hard, where it feels like everyone else in Gen Z here is trying so hard just to be accepted, you know. And here's Lee Pace just like, hey, y'all want to drink and meditate? I'm down for that. And Gem Y asking James. Yeah, now that I think about that, yeah, that is kind of like, I mean, the allegory I think becomes very, like, I'm trying not to spoil the film here, but the allegory becomes very much on the nose by the end of the film, which I don't mind because by that point it's like, yeah, you got to make it clear what is being said in this film, and it's like, yeah, you know, if you depend too much on technology, it's gonna kill you, basically. And not in kind of like a, you know, the machines will take over bullshit type of way, but yeah, like, you know, like you said, just trying to figure out what's going on with that. I almost kind of want, I think I wrote that down on my comment card too. I was like, this film needs more Connor O'Malley. I kept waiting for, I don't think this happened in the film, but like I would love if there was a post-credit scene of just Connor O'Malley just freaking the F out in the end and just screaming at them for what they did to their place and how there's blood and guts all over the place. That would have been so cool. Prey had a better chance of Blu-ray because it can be released in various sets of packaging in the Predator films. That, I think, is Noel right there. I think that's the huge thing too. Yeah, if it's in a set, I feel like at this point, if you're going to do a full Predator set, you have to have Prey on it. There's no way you can't have a complete Predator set and not include that film on there. Like you might get some divisiveness, like, oh, should we put Alien versus Predator on here? But like, no, you have to put Prey. There's no debating it's a Predator film. You got to have it on there. Yeah, I was very surprised. Like, at the very end, it's like, oh man, here's Connor O'Malley. I thought, oh man, is he gonna scream? Is he gonna freak out like everyone else was in this film? I just want him to be like at the end of that. I just wanted like the film to have like that moment with like Bob Saget in Dumb and Dumber, where he comes through and it's like, oh my god, there's blood everywhere. Just screams at them all. That would have been so great. All right, what do we got next? Ooh, we got Bullet Train. All right, another fun film. We got a lot of fun films in August. I was quite surprised. All right, let me get the notes up here because it was a huge cast for this one. I got to get all the notes up here. All the notes, and I gotta blow this up a bit. There we go. All right. So here we go. Bullet Train in 3, 2, 1. So Bullet Train is a heist film, I guess. It's an ensemble heist film. An all-star ensemble heist film, if you want to call it that. Whereas basically you throw a bunch of quirky characters together. They're all kind of seeking the same thing. There's some robbery, there's some murder, and there's some silly stuff that goes on. And at that level, I think of just having like this cavalcade of actors all just gallivanting about this this bullet train and just getting into all sorts of weird and wild action, it mostly works. It comes about as advertised. So there's a few characters we follow here, but definitely the central character we follow is Brad Pitt playing Ladybug, a code name that he's been given because he thinks it's supposed to be like an unlucky term. And I do like how they set up Brad Pitt's character as like this assassin who's trying to reform himself. Basically, he doesn't want to favor killing people anymore. Like if he has to, he'll do it. But he doesn't want to use guns as much, and he just wants simple jobs. And this current job he's on seems simple. Just, board a bullet train in Tokyo, find a suitcase, take it off. That's it. That's all you have to do. Of course, it won't be that simple. We know it won't be that simple, because there's a whole bunch of other characters thrown into the mix. You have Aaron Taylor Johnson playing Tangerine and Brian Tyree Johnson playing Lemon. And they are a brother assassins. They were raised as brothers, and I believe at one point like they're referred to as twins, even though they look nothing alike. And they have their own quirky personalities as well. Like Tangerine's a little bit of like a hot-headed person, so easy to play off of him. And then you have Lemon, who's obsessed with Thomas the Tank Engine. and this is like an adorable running gag that I feel like some audiences might get tired of, but I could not get enough of it, where basically Lemon is trying to like place labels on everyone to kind of like relate them to Thomas the Tank Engine. So throughout the film, he's trying to find out, who's like the bullheaded one that you got to watch out for. So who's the Diesel, basically. So throughout the film, he's just trying to figure out who's the Diesel of the train. So they're involved with this because they're protecting like a mobster while at the same time coming into possession of the suitcase. Then you also have another character after the suitcase called the Prince, played by Joey King. She has mafia ties as well. She's puts on like the guise of a schoolgirl, but she's also very clever with weapons and bombs that she can manipulate others to do her bidding. You also have Andrew Koji playing Yuchi, who is a father who's seeking revenge for mobsters hurting his son. And he gets roped into this mess, and all these characters basically collide. And then you have like a whole bunch of other characters thrown into the mix as well as the film keeps going on. So you've got Michael Shannon, you've got Benito Ocasio, you've got Sandra Bullock, Zazie Beetz, Logan Lerman, and even some surprise ones I didn't expect, like if I told you what character Ryan Reynolds' character played in this, you would not believe me. And you would not suspect him. Also, props for using Channing Tatum as, like, just a passenger. Like, he doesn't really have much of any kind of contribution to the film, other than thinking that everyone wants to have sex with him. So, and all the characters, they do have very much, like, a gimmick to them. Which it feels like their gimmicks could wear out fast, but I feel like they're played up just enough to the point where you kind of get used to them and comfortable that you're not as bothered by all their little quirks. I do like how they kind of vary it up, where you're not quite sure where these characters will come into play and how long they'll last. Like at one point, I won't reveal which character it is, but there's one character who, before they even get on the train, we get their entire backstory. We learn about their childhood, how they grew up, how they learned to kill, how they formed a romance, and how they lost that romance, and how they became a person bound for revenge, and they've come on this train, and they're gonna get bloody vengeance. And they're killed within 2 minutes. So there's very much a lot of, like, subversion here. You also have characters who have little gimmicks with, like, the weapons they wield, or like one of them uses poison. They all have like little gimmicks where it's like, it almost feels like this could be like a superhero film where they all have their own little weird traits to them. And it mostly works. And I think it's mostly just because there's a fast-paced nature, but also like a fun aspect where the characters have genuine chemistry that comes off on screen. Like Brian Tyree Henry has this like effortless charm to him, where it's like he doesn't have to put too much work into like these ridiculous lines that are just fun on their own, and it makes it work. Where you're kind of pulling for him. You hope that he'll come out perfect in the end on this. Other characters, I do like the fact that even though there's a lot of like winking and quirkiness, there's also characters who are taking this straight and seriously that do kind of switch things up and let you know that yeah, there's serious stakes going on here. Particularly Andrew Koji. Like Koji's performance is 100% earnest. He's not winking at the camera. He's not doing anything silly. He is playing this straight as a father bound for revenge. And to an extent, even Michael Shannon's character has a little bit on that, but which is a little bit surprising because Michael Shannon, I'm kind of used to seeing like going off a little bit with his madness, and he does a little bit here. But I was surprised how much more restrained he was in this film. It's very brutal. It's very silly. There are aspects where I feel like the comedy is like playing it a little bit fast and loose here. Like you really do have to accept the fact that nobody else on this train is getting suspicious that there's a lot of fighting going on. Like at one point, Brad Pitt and Brian Tyree Henry get into a fight in a quiet car. And basically they're trying to cover up the fact that they're fighting, but also try to be quiet at the same time. That this woman who keeps shushing them doesn't notice the fact, or doesn't take notice of the fact that they have scars and they're kind of bleeding here. I guess she doesn't care. I guess maybe like these exchanges on bullet trains are just like kind of like a common thing because it's like, just look, I don't care if you guys are fighting each other and slamming each other's heads into the walls and like trying to like shoot each other under the table. Just keep it quiet, you know? Even like you kind of think like they have to be, because there's even a moment where like a fight is halted just by one of the people on the train coming by with snacks. It's like she interrupts the fight just saying like, hey, you guys want snacks? No? You good? Oh, you want water? Okay, fine. All right, I'll get out of your hair. Keep doing whatever you're doing. Where you kind of have to like suspend a little bit of disbelief on that level. Eventually, though, like, you know, they do get everyone off the train so that when we can have like the big explosive showdown where things literally go off the rails, it's a little bit more believable. A little bit. It's still very much a farce, and I think you kind of got to know that going into it. Otherwise, you're kind of going to be questioning it the whole time. It's like, how are all these assassins on this train, and how are they all getting away with this? But yeah, there's some cute moments here. I do feel like that, though, that, you know, this is definitely going to be like a bit of a test for some people to see how much they can endure the dark comedy at play here. Because I think it kind of like wears out a lot of its fire by the end of the film. Especially when like, because like they have like the silliness of like revealing the backstories of a character where they get their own typography and a cool introduction, stuff like that. And by the time like the last introduction you get is you get a backstory of a bottle of water. Like it gets its own title card and everything, and you're kind of like, okay, I think you've exhausted this bit. I think you kind of got to move on here. And thankfully it does. There's enough going on within this film that I feel like it works. I do like the dialogue too. The dialogue feels natural, where it's not just like characters will just accept that, okay, this is going to be your backstory time, or, oh, this is going to work. You're going to make your empty threats, and this is where you're going to make revenge. You could tell that like these are characters who are very much aware of that, especially with like Brad Pitt's character. It's just like, yeah, I've heard the allegory story you're about to tell. Like, yes, I know you're bound by revenge. I've been down this road before. So having a little bit of that knowing nature is very refreshing. In addition to all like the twists and turns that come with this, there's a fair amount, like, even though there's a lot of like twists that are kind of like telegraphed early, you can see coming, they're fast enough where it's like you're not as bothered by it. That even when like there are some surprising moments where like you think characters are dead and then they're not. Like there's some fake outs. There's surprises about which character runs into who and who's involved here. Not to mention, especially when you get to the third act, there's a lot of like almost kind of like left field twists that are thrown into that. Thankfully, they're just small stuff. Like there's Ryan Reynolds' character who's just thrown in just at the end, just in case you weren't surprised enough. Here's another little surprise for you. So on that level, with just the speed of this film and the quirkiness and the dark comedy and the exceptionally bloody violence that happens here, I think on that level, with all things combined, it mostly works. I feel like by the end, it kind of wears out its welcome and saying, okay, kind of got to wrap this up a little bit here. I see what you're doing, but the quirkiness is wearing off. You kind of got to speed this up a bit. So for the most part, as an all-star action ensemble with a heist angle, it works. There's enough going on where I was never once bored with this film. And it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, Bullet Train I think was surprising for a lot of people. I didn't mention this in the review, but like Bullet Train is based on a book. I was gonna get around to reading it, but I never quite did. So I talked with some people who had seen the book, and they were very cautious about it because they looked at all the trailers of it and they thought, oh man, they're not gonna get the story of the book. And for the most part, from what I understand from some people, and maybe just their interpretation, but it sounds like it mostly stuck to what made the book great. And then just kind of like, and then it feels like a lot of like the absurdist stuff that didn't work in the film, it feels like that was thrown in by like the screenwriter and director. So I guess like, I mean, I'd have to read it myself to confirm, but from what I'm hearing from people who have read the book, it's a pretty apt adaptation. So that's good. I mean, for an action film involving like, like heists and like an all-star ensemble to have like a fairly faithful interpretation of a book, that's kind of surprising. You don't see that as often. All right. 2 more reviews left. I think these might be mini ones just because I'm kind of losing my voice a little bit. I'll try these as best I can. So we'll talk about another new film. Talk about Day Shift. Let me get the notes up here. All right. And 3, 2, 1. So Day Shift is a film about vampire hunters. And I'm sure, like, just saying that, like, I know, like, immediate people are like, oh, okay, it's another film about vampires, and they're gonna be the vampire hunters. Is this gonna be like, like Carpenter's vampires, stuff like that, or even like the recent Netflix vampire films that we've gotten in the past few years? And kinda. I mean, here's the thing. I think this film mostly works when it focuses on its strengths of action and just like a little bit more of like the camaraderie. Not as much of it works as I would like, but it's surprising how much of it does work. So the premise is that Jamie Foxx plays Bud Jablonski, who's a vampire hunter posing as a pool cleaner, and he needs some money. He needs to get a lot of money to keep his daughter in town, so we have like a lot for him to fight for. So he ends up working with a different vampire hunter. He ends up working with an organization he was cast out of, and he ends up unearthing like a big vampire conspiracy going on within California. So he ends up working with Dave Franco, playing a character called Seth, who's basically a pencil pusher at a vampire hunter agency. Like, he's barely done any field work. He's a bookworm, so of course he's like the perfect match for like Jamie Foxx's character, who's used to improvising and killing vampires. So they have a decent dynamic. It does feel like, I feel like it's almost kind of like forced too fast for them to have camaraderie, because right after like their first like vampire hunt, where it feels like Franco doesn't do too much, they're immediately like connecting. It's like, oh, like, you did a good job, man, for being a pencil pusher. You're great, and they immediately hit it off. And you can almost kind of like feel like the running time, like kind of like like it's like the film's tapping its watch, saying like, look, these guys got to connect, and they got to connect fast. So just quickly as you can. So like they established like their chemistry fairly early, that they're best buds, that, there doesn't really feel like there's too much to build on, that by the second half of the film, they're pretty much buds. Like they're looking out for each other, and they become like this buddy cop duo as vampire hunters. So like mostly like at this point, like the film kind of like mostly telegraphs itself where it's going here and what Bud wants and how he's going to get it. And you're mostly just relying on a few on a few great performances and a lot of great action sequences. I will give the film credit. A lot of the vampire hunter sequences are pretty clever. There's some fun and fast action here. There is some cleverness with like decapitation and amputation and blood and guts all over the place here. I especially liked Steve Howry and Scott Adkins playing like this brother duo of vampire hunters. They're kind of fun. Like they don't have as much quirkiness as I would like for them to have. Especially when the film really wants you to love how much they share everything and they kind of have like this weird bond between them. And also because like you don't get as much of them, like you only get like one really cool scene of them like unearthing like a vampire hive and then doing some cool action stuff. It feels like you almost kind of wanted more of them as the film went on, or you kind of wanted to see them, get involved in like a cool death or something like that. But unfortunately you don't get that. What you do get a lot of is Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg shows up in this film as Big John Elliott, who's supposed to be one of like the veteran vampire hunters who's too cool for this world. So basically, it's Snoop Dogg playing Snoop Dogg. So if you ever wanted to see a vampire hunting film where Snoop Dogg wields a minigun, you'll get that here, and I'll admit it's pretty fun. I do like the fact that Snoop Dogg does get the last line here, and even though it's corny, it's ridiculous, and for a lot of people it's not going to work, I kind of mostly dug it. And then you got some decent performances here, like Eric Lang. Eric Lang, I feel, is real funny as kind of like, the hot-headed vampire hunter chief. Peter Stormare is in his element as kind of like a pawn shop owner who specializes in vampire hunter teeth. So there's some decent performances here. Like, everyone's mostly playing up to their strengths. But at the same time, nobody really, like, breaks out of what they're expected to do in this type of role. Like, everyone's roles are pretty much telegraphed pretty early. Even when there's a twist thrown into the mix of a vampire transformation from someone you wouldn't expect, it doesn't really change the dynamic that much or the chemistry that much that it feels like it's just like, even when like it's supposed to be like a big reveal, but at the same time it just feels like it's just finding extra stuff for the film to do and not all that interesting. It's just like, oh, here's something that'll keep the plot going a little bit longer so we can get to like the cool sequence where Jamie Foxx has like a showdown with the vampire hunter queen, played by I forgot her name at the time. Natasha Liu Bordizzo, playing Heather, who is kind of an interesting villain. I like the fact that she's very much trying to be like this vampire who wants to focus on gentrification, but it feels like this angle is only touched on for like a little bit. Like, it just kind of feels like, okay, that's her plan established in the first act, and then it's not fully explored. It's just like, she's a vampire, she's moving in, she's gonna get all the vampires in here and wipe out all the humans, blah 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 blah. Vampires are gonna take over California, so vampire hunters come into it. So yeah, like, the action is good. I would say, like, I feel like that you almost need a little bit more blood and guts here, because I feel like if you're gonna just have a lot of action, which this film does have, I feel like you need a lot more blood and guts for like the vampire hunter stuff, just to put it over that edge and have that extra level of cool. And I guess that's my biggest problem with the film. Like, I never felt like it took off in like a big way. Like, all these elements mostly work, and yet there's never a moment where I'm just like, oh man, this is the vampire hunter film on Netflix you need to see. Wait, isn't it just like what was that other one? Night Guard or something like that. I swear there was some other vampire film that had night in it, and it's like, is this gonna be different than that one? No, it's not really. It's like there's some better performances, there's some better action, but other than that, I don't really think there's a lot here that's going to impress anyone who's seen like the multitudes of like vampire films, and especially vampire hunter films. There's not a whole lot here to just like rush your Netflix queue and watch this film right away. It's just, it needs an extra kick to make this type of film work, and it's just not there. The idea of vampires being an allegory for gentrification is cool. That's not a new idea, too. That's the other thing too. It's like gentrification as like a villain has been present in like a lot of stuff for like especially for urban fantasies. Like what was, oh god, there was a film, I think it was on like it might have been Amazon or Netflix, but yeah, there was another one called like Brooklyn versus Vampires, which was literally just like vampires doing gentrification. Like, and at least, like, I didn't even like that film as much, but at least that film held firm on that allegory and focus. Like here in Day Shift, it just felt like an excuse for, you know, the characters to keep going on their vampire hunt. Like it's introduced, like that's their scheme, and then it's forgotten about. And just even like even gentrification in general for a horror film has become way too common. Like in some aspects you can understand it with like with Candyman, it makes sense. Candyman might be the most important film to do gentrification. But but then you have other films like Brooklyn versus Vampires. I'm trying to think, like last year they had like a few horror films on Amazon that tried to have gentrification as like a big theme through stuff like, oh, God, like they're so forgettable. Stuff like Bingo Hell and stuff like that. Although like Bingo Hell, I feel like almost got lost with what it was trying to say. Like, what was even the point? It's like, okay, everyone gets money when they win from bingo, but like the money's evil for some reason. What even happened? I would love to see someone just try to explain Bingo Hell and how it works as like an allegory. I feel like it, because I feel like it's not just gentrification. I feel like there's something else going on there. Fright Night could also be a version of that, but in reverse. Yeah, I mean, like, Fright Night could also kind of be like, maybe it's just because it's similar, but it could almost be like an allegory for like the whole, like, you know, white flight and all that. Maybe they should make a remake that's just directly that, just like play it off like Fright Night with the subtitle like White Flight. All right. Oh my god. I'm not quite gonna do a review of it. I'll just do like a mini review of it, just because I'm losing my voice a little bit here. But little film I just wanted to mention here. It is playing in theaters. If you look around, you can find it online too. I think it's coming out online soon. But there's a little independent film that released called Clay Dream, which is a documentary about the life of animator Will Vinton, who, if you don't know Will Vinton, you could basically consider him kind of almost like the same way that Walt Disney did for 2D animation, Walt Vinton did for stop motion animation. Will Vinton, you might know, he's worked on stuff like California Raisins. What else he's done? He's worked on the shows like the PJs. He did that messed up, what's it called? Like the Adventures of Mark Twain, I believe it was called. Basically the stop motion film that was too dark for kids that they had to put like an adult label on it. And it's like, if you look up like messed up claymation film, you'll probably find that clip. So he's basically worked on that studio who did all that stuff. He unfortunately died of cancer a few years ago. So this documentary it's a little bit flowery. I guess I would say not too much. Like it does focus on the fact that Vinton's business was expanding too fast and not all of his projects work, and he had problems trying to maintain his business, but also kind of look back on his legacy and look at all like the cool stuff that he did with like the PJs and the California Raisins and all the different little specials and stuff he worked on like that. And also really cool to see that, you know, without Will Vinton, we wouldn't have Laika Studios, which a lot of people thought that like Laika was kind of like getting back at Will, but because it wasn't quite doing all the stuff that Will had originally wanted to do. But Will's like, no, man, it's cool. Like I love seeing more stop motion come about, and the fact that Laika's still doing that for feature films is great. Yeah, it's Clay Dream. It's a small independent film. I'm trying to think where it might be. I think it's only playing in theaters right now. I think it's only in like limited release right now. So if you look around at your art house theaters, you'll probably find Clay Dream there. It's definitely working out. Like if you're an animation enthusiast, like myself, and you love just like looking up all the history of animation, this is definitely a must watch, especially if you really like Leica animation, this is great. Just kind of like see like the legacy that came before it and what led to Leica. So yeah, it's a great little documentary. I try to cover like smaller films anytime I can here on the channel, just because like I always get lost in like the big films. Like, the big films always crowd up, but I always do get like smaller films that will like pass by my inbox. Like Clay Dreams actually did come to me like through the distributor and stuff like that. So yeah, there's so much to cover. Nonetheless, Caruso was the amazing work on Return. That's right, he did the kind of like the clay effects on Return to Oz. Basically, any claymation made in the 20th century, in the later part of the 20th century, there's a chance, if it was like American made, there's a chance that Will Vinton was involved with it. But very much like the PJs. I believe there was like another show that he was shopping at the time. There was like, I believe there was like a Siskel and Ebert short where they were like both dinosaurs that his studio animated as well. Lots of cool stuff. Oh, and the I forgot to mention too, like he did like that whole music video thing with Michael Jackson too. So fascinating legacy. I'd heard of Will Vinton, but I hadn't known like the full story about what went down with his studio. So it was very fascinating to kind of see like the darker side of what happened with that business, as well as kind of like the having this ending that kind of has like Will basically kind of riding off into the sunset, kind of feeling good about the legacy he's left behind too. So great documentary. So we covered a little bit of everything. All right. So, let's do a quick recap of what we covered here today. So, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is a dark comedy about I guess like kind of like the divide between like Gen X and Gen Y. Maybe a little bit of millennials. I guess us millennials got off fine in that. It's not a bad film if you look at it more on an allegorical level. Prey is an absolutely amazing Predator film. Go check it out on Hulu. 3,000 Years of Longing is a surprisingly moving and mature fantasy romance with Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba. It is currently playing in theaters this weekend. Definitely go check it out if you want to see something that you wouldn't quite expect from a fantasy film. Bullet Train should still be playing in theaters right now. It's a fun all-star ensemble heist. Really enjoyed it. Day Shift is an almost there vampire hunter film that doesn't quite work. And Clay Dreams is a fascinating documentary on stop motion and claymation. I think his studio worked on some of the Tool videos. And I know exactly the one you're talking about because I watched that film obsessively. The one where it's where it's the person like trapped in the room and they open that pipe and all the organs are coming out of that music video. I believe they worked on. Oh no, wait. I think it was, but yeah, I think there was like another one at like a circus that very much looks like Vinton's style. I'm pretty sure they worked on that one. All right, so that's our stream. And I guess we'll be back in a few weeks, just because like we're coming up on Labor Day, which is notoriously terrible for the box office. Although I don't know, maybe it might change in years past, just because last year Shang-Chi broke a box office record for opening on Labor Day weekend. So yeah, like Labor Day is basically like the snow day for movies. If you notice, not a lot of films are coming out next weekend, and that's very much by design. But we do have a lot of films coming up in September to look forward to. Stuff like Barbarian and The Invitation, and oh god, there's quite a few else here. But hey, why do you think a Dragon Ball Z film released last weekend? It's because August is the perfect time. August is a little bit of like the wild card to throw these films out there. So yeah, I'll be back in a few weeks. We'll talk about more films. I also, to let you know, I am working on other videos at the time, just working on scripts to get them ready, that I can eventually shoot them. I've been working on the Snyderverse video. That's been taking a long time to get that script done, just because so much has come out about it. But I'll eventually get to that. I'll also do like some more video essays on other stuff, as well as the Criterion videos, and we'll get these reviews up soon as well. So, thanks for everyone stopping by. In case you were just stopping in, my name is Mark McPherson. You can read my reviews on movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, and twincitiesgeek.com. So, until next time, have a good one.